Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Cinder for the Spooks, and tonight we will be discussing the case of Luke Seabrook and how he met his demise after encountering one of, if not the most, dangerous diving hazards out there, differential water pressure, also known as Delta P. Now, if you know me in real life, you know I will not shut up about the infamous Delta P phenomena whenever I get the chance to talk about it. If anyone that was in my public speaking class sees this, no you didn't. For some weird reason, I love learning about diving and diving related incidents, be it in the open water, caves, what have you. Will I ever go diving because of this special interest of mine? Probably not. But if I ever get the chance, I might just take it. Check out the Scary Interesting YouTube channel because I'm sure their videos furthered my interest in this topic even more. If you're seeing this, I love your guys' videos. Anyway, since it's a special topic for me, I figured it was a great one to talk about to get back into things. Originally, I was just going to talk about the phenomenon itself. I still am. But then I discovered this case. Once I learned more about it, the more I realized I needed to talk about it and spread awareness about Delta P and the movement to safeguard against it. This case takes us all the way up to the country of Canada, home to a whole lot of moose and maple syrup, ketchup chips, flaky biscuits, Smarties, and you can't forget the beloved Toronto Maple Leafs. More specifically though, the town of Annapolis Royal in the province of Nova Scotia. Shout out to Canada since my dad is from there. Yes, I Spooks am half Canadian. I've only been to London, Ontario, but still. Plus, Derek Gerard lives there, so I left the country.
Oh, Canada, our home and native land.
Annapolis Royal, often dubbed as Canada's birthplace, holds a pivotal role in Canadian history, serving as a hub for European colonization, Indigenous interactions, and military conflicts. Nestled among the Annapolis River and overlooking the Annapolis Basin, this picturesque town exudes charm with its well-preserved architecture and scenic surroundings. Speaking of the Annapolis River, the Nova Scotia Power tidal plant sits between the river and the Bay of Fundy. I've seen it be referred to as a tidal plant, dam, and generation station, so as far as I care, they all mean the same thing. The Annapolis Tidal Power Plant came online in 1984. The turbine is a single-effect, 7.6 meter diameter horizontal axis stray-flow turbine designed to generate power during discharge from the reservoir into the sea. It has a capacity of 20 megawatts and a daily output of roughly 80 to 100 megawatt hours, depending on the tides. Now, like all structures like it, inspections occurred regularly in order to make sure the plant's operation was running according to regulation. So, on the day of July 15, 2015, occupational diver Luke Seabrook's job was to inspect a sluice gate that controlled the flow of water into a reservoir at the plant. That's all it was supposed to be. A routine inspection. Luke Elgin David Seabrook was 39 years old and from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, but he was originally born in Wasaga Beach, Ontario, Canada. He had a passion for being around the water, whether it be scuba diving with his wife, Cheryl, sailboating with his friends and family, or diving at work. Luke is described as being an exceptionally kind soul, thoughtful, loyal, and generous, leaving a lasting impression on all who had the pleasure of knowing him. He was a very energetic man, always busy, adventurous, and intelligent. Luke loved spending time on his boat, in his garden, and most of all, he loved Cheryl, who he'd married in the spring of that year, in around April of 2015. So, what is Delta P? I keep rambling on about it, but I haven't explained what it is. Delta P is known as differential pressure, the change of value between 2 points in a system, or fluid flow. It's referred to as Delta P because of the symbol that it's depicted as. Delta P, delta, denotes change, and P represents pressure. Delta P is commonly used in various fields such as physics, engineering, fluid dynamics, and medicine to quantify pressure differences, which can be crucial for understanding fluid behavior, determining flow rates, and assessing the efficiency of systems. Here's a short clip that explains the phenomenon more in depth.
Delta P stands for differential pressure. Our discussion refers to situations where the pressures between two bodies of water are dramatically different. In a situation like this, the bodies of water continuously seek to equalize themselves. In this example, the body of water on the right wants to rush to the body of water on the left by means of the pipe between them. The pressure exerted on the valve stopping this water transfer can be enormous, depending on the difference in the depths of the water and the diameter of the pipe. If the difference between the depth of water is 50 feet and the diameter of the pipe is 10 inches, the force of water exerted on the valve is nearly 1,700 pounds. If the valve was suddenly opened and your arm was near, it would be sucked into the hole instantly. Trying to remove your arm would be like trying to lift a car completely off the ground with one hand. You could only remove your arm if the pressures between the two bodies became nearly equalized. But at the pressure in this example, your body makes a perfect seal, stopping the bodies of water from equalizing. The formula for calculating the force of water through a hole at a particular depth is the area of the hole multiplied by the difference in water depth multiplied by the psi per foot of water depth. Or, in the situation just described, the 10-inch hole equals 78 square inches times 50 feet of water depth times 0.432 psi per foot of freshwater depth equals 1,685 pounds of water pressure. If you are diving in salt water, be sure to use 0.445 psi in your formula instead. You can't see or feel a delta P situation as you dive near it. It grabs you suddenly, and it doesn't let go until the pressure is equalized. When it's got you, it's got you.
Now, my sources said two different things. One CBC News article claimed Seabrook had been down in the water on the Bay of Fundy side for only a minute before he radioed "Pull me up," with his mic cutting off a minute later, leading to all communication with him being lost. The Halifax Examiner, however, claimed he'd been working underwater for an hour and a half before trouble arrived. They also said Seabrook had become entangled in his diving gear and that's how he passed, which is untrue. Personally, I think Seabrook had only been down in the water for only a minute, because as we know, delta P is a hella strong force. The cause of the delta P hazard was another gate that had been left and locked in the open position about 16 to 18 inches. The water of the Annapolis River and the Bay of Fundy rushed from an area of higher elevation to the basin's lower elevation, creating the suction that dragged Luke in the impossible-to-escape current where he became lodged under the gate, since the helmet he wore was too big to fit through. The suction was so much that it pulled the helmet and suit apart. It also dislodged Luke's regulator, so his mouth was open in the water. The force he'd come under crushed two of his ribs, and when his body was later recovered, it was covered in contusions. The gate hadn't been confirmed closed before Luke began the dive. Apparently, the method used to check if the gate was closed was to allow gravity to lower the gate, and then employees would walk along the dam, grabbing cables and making sure there was some slack to them, to see if it had closed. Seabrook's younger brother Garth managed to speak with the surface team and dive team, composed of the backup diver and diver supervisor, to find out more detail about what happened to his brother. He was told they were helpless, desperately wanting to rescue Luke. They weren't able to pull hard enough to get him out, so the divers had to tie his cord up to prevent him from getting pulled any further. The backup diver immediately tried to jump in after Seabrook, but was stopped, so he wouldn't succumb to the same fate. For safety's sake, the team had to wait 30 to 45 minutes for the tides to equalize on both sides of the gate. Only then did the backup diver go down. When asked to comment on the incident, Nova Scotia Power simply replied, "Thoughts, sympathies, and prayers continue to be with the family." It's giving
sorrows, prayers.
The Department of Labor slapped a couple of work orders on the site, including training, employment, maintenance, and operation records for both Nova Scotia Power and Paul's Diving Services, the company Luke was employed to and was contracted to perform the inspection, to be released. After an investigation by the Provincial Department of Labor, Paul's Diving pleaded guilty to 2 violations of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, specifically failing to have a written dive plan in place, as well as failing to ensure the dive was not conducted in hazardous water flow conditions. A dive plan is a document that outlines how a dive will be conducted to ensure the safety and health of the participants. On October 27, 2017, 2 years after Seabrook's death, Judge William Digby accepted the pleas and ordered Paul's Diving to pay a fine of $34,000, $24,700 today in U.S. currency, and to hold a series of safety precautions. Interestingly, the owner, Greg Paul, later appealed the conviction, claiming that the Crown's expert witness did not disclose that they had a conflict of interest. The Crown in Canada being the prosecution, or state for us Americans. The Crown witness being David Geddes, the president of the Canadian Association of Diving Contractors from 2018 to 2020. Basically, Paul claimed that Geddes was not only one of his teachers, but also taught the dive supervisor and other divers that were there when Seabrook died. He claimed that since Geddes taught him everything he knew, and also submitted his report to the court, that there was a clear relationship between the company and Geddes. While yes, Geddes did file a report with the court, Paul really had no ground to stand on. He said that he used the dive plan Geddes provided, but with modifications he'd made of his own. He says this not once, but twice, basically arguing, I used his dive plans, but only changed a couple of things. Like, come on, man, you're essentially taking responsibility for taking a good dive plan and fucking it up. Needlessly to say, the appeal attempt failed, and actually, in November 2020, the Nova Scotia Department of Labor charged Paul with failing to comply with the terms of their original sentence. A hearing was held to have the trial postponed to March of 2022. I couldn't find any updates on the trial, so as of right now, that is where this matter stands. David Parks, CEO of the Divers Certification Board of Canada at the time, predicted that Nova Scotia would enact changes and follow the lead of Hydro-Quebec. Hydro-Quebec is another power distributor like Nova Scotia Power. After an incident where a female commercial diver was also killed by Delta P, Hydro-Quebec implemented a diving safety policy that went beyond provincial regulations and actually ended up raising the industry standard of safety and precaution. I believe the woman was 28-year-old Martine Coyote, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, who had become trapped by a hydro dam near the Chaudière Falls on November 30th, 2000. She spent 90 minutes in the water before she was rescued. She was wearing a video camera to inspect the concrete dam underwater when the underwater current pulled her into a hole at the base of the dam. Her autopsy revealed that she died from hypothermia since she was in the freezing cold water for an hour and a half, but wouldn't have been in that situation if it weren't for Delta P. I disagree with Parks, however, as I couldn't find any policy changes from Nova Scotia Power. There's also another death that occurred at a Nova Scotia Power hydroelectric site 5 years later. Andrew Nadowski died on October 16, 2020, while doing work at a Nova Scotia Power reservoir. The civil engineer from New Brunswick had been trying to swim out to retrieve a piece of malfunctioning survey equipment about 100 meters, or approximately 328 feet, from the Marshall Falls Reservoir of Sheet Harbor shoreline, when he ran into trouble of some kind. Nobody knows for sure, but it's suspected he was hit on the head with the piece of equipment. He drowned and was recovered the next day. I could actually make a separate video on Andrew because of how badly the investigation into his death was botched. I actually might, but let me know if you'd be interested in that down in the comments. As of July 18, 2016, only Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland and Labrador, Manitoba, and Alberta have enshrined in legislation the Canadian Standards Association's Diving Safety Code and Competency Standard. These CSA guidelines are crafted by divers, educators, and regulators and updated every 5 years. I think Nova Scotia has adopted them, but I'm unsure. It was really hard to find legislation that mentioned the guidelines in Nova Scotia. The only thing I found was the document titled Occupational Diving Regulations made under Section 82 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Steve Donovan, a former military and commercial diver who now does consulting work through the Occupational Diving Safety Association, says the hazard of Delta P is avoidable with proper preparation and detection, yet it's still a leading cause of death in the diving community. Too often, people underestimate the force. Preach. Donovan himself once narrowly escaped getting trapped underwater in Halifax's Bedford Basin. A 2016 analysis conducted by a diver in Belgium found Delta P caused nearly a quarter of 577 diving deaths in a variety of countries, Canada included. That means 1 in every 4 diving deaths were Delta P related. Donovan is urging changes in government regulations and industry standards to better address the threat. Donovan has released his own report looking at the specifics of Luke Seabrook's death and is calling for dozens of changes, including that the industry use more technology and do more to assess the risks before anyone gets in the water. Poor planning is probably the #1 cause of every diving incident and fatality, he says. What Donovan really wants is to see more being done to ensure divers are aware of and equipped to detect Delta P, specifically with remote operated technology such as electronic meters to measure water flow and detect the threat before anyone goes in the water. Sure, it's expensive, but it could save lives. The Nova Scotia Department of Labor, Skills and Industry is aware of Donovan's report and claims to share the same common goal of making diving workplaces safer, and that the plan is to identify the best practices and actions that will improve diving safety, such as the use of said remote technology. However, the provincial occupational diving regulations, which the province developed after saying they would consult with the industry, doesn't include any mention of this. Seabrook's mother did file a lawsuit against Nova Scotia Power, but dropped the case due to there being no prospects of damages being awarded. The Annapolis tidal power plant was shut down in 2019 due to harmful environmental factors and one of the engines blowing. The description of Luke provided in the beginning was taken from the GoFundMe that was set up for the Seabrook family. It was actually set up by Jarvis DeRoche, who was the backup diver on the dive team that went in to rescue Seabrook. Luke Seabrook is survived by his mother, Angela Seabrook, brother, Garth Seabrook, and his widow, Cheryl. Alrighty guys, that's the end of tonight's case. I know, it's sad and feels unfulfilling, right? That's why I made this video in the first place, to spread awareness and get people talking about it. Maybe then we can really rally for more change. The GoFundMe is still up and donations are still able to be made, so if you're interested, I'll leave a link to it in the description. Let me know what you thought about the video down in the comments below, and if you'd like to see me cover other cases like this one. Don't forget to leave a like or a comment if you enjoyed the video. If you want to send me video suggestions or your true or untrue stories to narrate, contact me via my email in the description, initforthespooks@gmail.com. My name is In It For The Spooks, and don't forget, when it's gotcha, it's gotcha. Peace. Y'all, it's 5 in the morning. I'm going to bed.